listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11, Monday through Friday. Steve Moore's joining us right now, and we've certainly had an interesting ride, Steve, in the markets since the beginning of the Iran war. But it seems like we've kind of made back everything that we've lost. And, it is, it's something we need to understand. How are you?
Well, Martha, good to be with you. Before I get into that, I wanted to mention to you what happened on Saturday night, if I may, because
Sure.
I was there.
Oh, you were?
And, yeah, I was at the dinner, and it was... it was a strange. This is probably my 8th time going to these correspondence dinners. I haven't been in a while because Trump. This was the first one I think Trump has spoken at, and so the first thing I noticed when I got there, Martha, was I came about an hour early before they have a bunch of pre-dinner parties, CNN and Fox News and Wall Street Journal. So it's kind of fun to just, to see and be seen at those things. And so I got there about an hour early because I thought, the president's going to be the security will be amazingly tight. It'll take a long time to get in and out. I walked in 5 minutes. I had a little cardboard invitation that I was sitting at the Wall Street Journal table, so they sent me the little little invitation, and I just flashed that to the people, the security people, and that's what everybody's saying. They just flashed, here's my invitation.
I heard that. Yeah.
Let me in. It was crazy. I brought my passport, because I thought they'd ask, but they never even checked.
So do you think they just thought this was a bunch of safe people coming to this hotel, and so they just let them walk through?
Well, that would be that maybe, but that's crazy.
Yeah,
that's crazy. I mean, and people. One guy who was in front of me. He said he showed his thing, and then his girlfriend or wife, I don't know who she was. She walks in. The security guy says, "Where's your invitation?" Oh, I forgot it, and they just let her in.
Oh my God,
scary. There was a real breakdown in security there, and then. And then I thought it was really strange and ill-advised that the president came in. They did the national anthem and they did the colors and so on, and then he was just sitting there right in the middle. I was maybe 100 feet from him. There were 2,000 people in that room, and he was like a sitting duck, just sitting there right in the middle of the thing. I thought that was. I think what he should have done is. Come in, give his speech, and left. He shouldn't just be sitting there with the First Lady. And, by the way, the Vice President was there.
He likes doing those kind of things, Steve, though. Well, he does like these dinners.
He does. But then, they at the table next to me was the Speaker of the House. There were 5 of the 6 people in succession to the presidency that were in that building. I think that was crazy. Now, when I was talking to the people at my table about 15 minutes into the dinner. They hadn't even served dinner yet. And all of a sudden went boom, boom, and it was just it sounded like a little bomb exploding, and everybody shrieked, and then the Secret Service I have to say, they were amazing. They were there, they were everywhere. They were instantaneously, they got that president off the stage in 25 seconds. So it was amazing. But did you notice on the tape, if you watch it, they're kind of shoving Trump off the stage to keep him safe. And he stumbles.
Yes.
Did you see that?
Yes.
And I thought, oh, my God, Martha, my heart I thought, oh, my God, he's been hit.
Right.
Because he stumbled down to the ground. And that was the longest 10 minutes of my life. What has happened to the president? And we didn't know. We didn't have the information. Everybody was either just hunching down. Some people crawled under the tables. And then, the security people go, where's the speaker? Where's the speaker? Well, he was, they pushed him under the table and they got him out. But it was just a really so frightening moment, not necessarily for our own safety, but everybody was concerned about maybe a sniper being in the room. But what happened to the president? And we didn't find out till 10 or 15 minutes later that he was safe and that he had not been.
they took him in one direction, J.D. Vance in another direction, and then Mike Johnson in another direction. And that's on purpose. Right. That's on purpose because that way there's no chance for all three of them to get, or very little chance for all three of them to get hit. So,
anyways, it was a very surreal experience.
It was like Designated Survivor. You know that show where everybody gets...
I know. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking about that, So, I just think it was, when you think about 5 of the 6 people in succession for the presidency being in the same building, I think that was, I was listening to Newt Gingrich before I came on your show, because I was on Fox News, and then he followed me, and he was saying, they were asking him, do you think the president and the vice president should be at these events together? He said it's fine. I think they maybe want to reconsider that, but I'm just glad that, everything went fine. And within 5 or 10 minutes, all the order had been restored, but it was a very frightening time.
I'm coming up today because I've gotten an invitation to the joint session tomorrow, and I'm going to be going to that, and I'll be getting my pass when I get to Congressman Carter's office, and I don't know what it's going to look like. We'll see.
I think it's going to be heavy security.
Yes.
When you get there.
And I think, and also today they are setting up the lawn of the White House for this event for King Charles that's going to be today. I won't be at that, obviously, but it's out in the open, but it is at the White House, which is very secure. Yeah.
Now, one of the things they were talking about is, when they have the new ballroom built, which he was criticized, Trump was criticized for doing that, but it'll be really secure, and they can do events like this in the ballroom. But, I was thinking, my mind was flashing back, Martha, because when you go into the Hilton, Washington Hilton, I walked right into the entrance where that infamous scene was. Remember when Ronald Reagan walked out in March of 81 and was shot? And so that's the second time now you've had, an incident like that at that hotel. Maybe they should be doing these at, the much more secure, Washington ballroom, which will be open in the year.
And also check the people that are staying in the hotel. I mean, typically they don't do that. They just check the people that are coming to the event. And what it looked like to me was that they had given some of these guys a break, because some of the guys that came running when the guy ran through had drinks in their hand, and they just dropped them on the floor. You know what I mean? Because they needed both hands to be running after this guy. So I agree with you. There was a slip there, but the Secret Service, made up for it.
They sure did. And the fact is, we didn't even know, at the table we were at, and I think most people in the ballroom, we didn't even know. So apparently he never even made it into the ballroom. He ran through the metal detector, and then I don't know, did they shoot him or did they tackle him? I don't actually know how they apprehended him.
They tackled him.
Yeah. And so that was a good thing, but it was a frightening moment, and people were, you don't know what's going on at that moment, and it ruined the whole evening. Obviously, we never even had dinner. They never served any dinner, and then getting out of there, it took me an hour and a half to get home because they shut down all the roads around the hotel and so on. So it was quite an evening.
Well, you will be very happy to hear that someone ran out from the protesters that were outside to try to run towards the motorcade. Now, it turned out to be a decoy motorcade. It was not the actual motorcade that Trump was in, but she didn't know that. And she started lipping off to the soldiers, and they pushed all the other protesters away with brute force and got her and arrested her because she was running after the motorcade. And, I'm glad they were serious. They were serious.
So here's a serious point I'd like. I know you had me on to talk about economics, but this is foremost on my mind.
No, it's okay.
That what is going on with the left today? I mean, they seem to be condoning violence more and more. And so how about the fact that New York City, you've got these thought leaders in the liberal movement saying, "Oh, it's okay to go into a grocery store and steal some fruit or steal some food, and these are just rich people you're stealing from, and it's okay to shoot somebody if they're an evil person like Donald Trump." This is really a cancer cell in the left. They are condoning violence. They're condoning theft. They're filled with hatred. And it is dangerous. And I'm waiting for Democrats to say, stop this nonsense. People are going to be hurt. This is not the way we conduct ourselves in the United States. We can have disagreements without getting violent like this. But I don't know. Maybe it's just in my imagination. But I'm hearing more and more Democrats basically not necessarily condoning, but just basically making excuses for this kind of violence.
You know how you all of a sudden start to hear names that supposedly were around all the time? There's this guy on the left, far left, called Hassan Piker. And he did this whole speech a couple of weeks ago where he said,
you can steal.
Yeah, you can steal, and we want to see the blood in the streets of capitalists. I mean, really, and then Jamie Raskin gets on CNN yesterday and goes, what rhetoric? I never say bad things about people. I just talk about their policies. It's just living in a dream world.
Even the mayor of New York City, who represents 7 million people, he's like basically saying, we're going to, take it off on the rich, and they're the evil people. He looked like Joker in the Batman with this video talking about how we're going to stick it to the rich people. I mean, that is not what America is about. And I'm getting more and more fearful about more violence like this happening because the left is more and more condoning it. Because with the left, they hate Trump. We have to get rid of Trump. So the ends justify the means with the left.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, I appreciate you. I'm glad you're safe. Okay. And I appreciate you telling us this story. Anything else from Saturday night?
Just that, again, I want to nod to the Secret Service. I mean, there was clearly a security breakthrough. There was protocols that need to be changed, and they will be. But I have to just tip my hat, as President Trump quite correctly did, about how professional they were. I mean, they were like within 10 seconds, they had secured that room. It was amazing.
Absolutely. Steve Moore, thanks for being with us today.
Okay, thank you, Martha.
Putting the talk in news talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
I'm joined right now by an old media friend of mine, David Bernkopt, who has spent 2 years in Alaska and wrote a novel, 2 Years on Another Planet. David, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy to talk to you. It's been a while. And you're in my old stomping grounds, Washington, D.C. It's maybe
such
too much time. I don't know.
I think it's a great place. I love the way D.C. is laid out. I love all the historical places that you can go. I mean, it's just full of history. And I just don't, I know that it's crazy here, but I don't know how you can't be an optimist here. I think these congressmen and senators, and I know that's not what we're going to talk about today, they need to get out and just walk around more. They need to get out and just see what's out here more because it's an inspiring place.
You mentioned something that struck me every single day I drove to work from Alexandria to the office in town, and I would go along the Potomac River, I'd go past the Pentagon, I'd see the Washington Monument, and every day
the Lincoln
I was
Memorial,
impressed by
the
it.
Jefferson Memorial.
Right. Yeah. Every day I was impressed by it because it's beautiful and it reminds you of the things that can be great about this country and unique.
So every time I come here, I try to carve out some time to go over to the Lincoln Memorial. I walk up the steps and I look to the left and, to the right, and I read the second inaugural address because it was hopeful and it was, touching, and it was probably the worst time in our history. Everybody wants to say, oh, this is the worst time. This is the worst time. It's not the worst time. Okay. It's pretty darn good, actually. Okay. Compared to Civil War. All right. Actual Civil War. I know people like to throw that term around, David, a lot, but there's an actual Civil War and then you can just use the term.
Look, I was a little bitty baby, but I remember my mom watching TV after Martin Luther King was shot. And she turned to my dad and I and she said, what is happening to this country? We're falling apart. And, not to downplay that, but we survived it. And we can survive this.
Yes, we can. So the book is 2 Years on Another Planet. Tell us about it.
So I was in Washington working on a show called Full Measure. I was enjoying it. But then the show started to become, to talk about the thing we're talking about here, it became more political than I was comfortable with. And so I quit without having any other job. And I got a cold call from a recruiter saying, would you like to move to Alaska and run a small investigative news operation? And I thought, that's the craziest thing I ever heard. But without a whole lot of other options, I went ahead and I moved there. And I spent 2 years there running this investigative unit, trying to figure out how to live in Alaska, which is a challenge. It's the strangest, most unique place I've ever been in. It's the only place I've ever been where people are really, really libertarian in all that means. They just, the state motto should be, I'll do me, you do you, because people really believe that. And at first I thought, maybe I journaled a lot, maybe I'll write a memoir. But then I didn't have it in me to be that honest about people I worked with. I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. And so I did a fictionalized account. And it is fiction. It's based on, characters are based on a lot of people that I worked with when I worked at CNN, when I worked in Washington, when I worked in Alaska. A lot of it is made up entirely. But it's fun. I call it Northern Exposure, set in a TV newsroom, if you remember that show.
Yes. Well, it's funny. I went to Alaska for my son's 40th birthday. We all took a trip to Alaska, and I see the attraction. I've always threatened that when I retired, I would move somewhere where there was just internet and UPS and nothing else, and so you could still be kind of connected, but you didn't have to deal with people anymore. I don't know if I could do that after only spending a short period of time in Alaska. So I have great respect for you for spending 2 years, because it's a beautiful, wonderful place. But you're right, it's a very different place, and it is another planet in a lot of ways.
It's lonely in a way. When you move up there and you don't have family, you don't have friends, and the closest flight is 3 hours to Seattle. People don't come visit you, 9 months out of the year because they don't want to deal with the cold or the dark. So it can be lonely, and I definitely have that as a theme in the book, how hard it is to cope with trying to get into a culture that is totally different. I mean, Anchorage, where I live, they had McDonald's, they got Walmart, but they also have a place where a fish store where you can go buy a whole halibut and have them cut it up for you right out of the ocean. At $9 a pound. So, that's not what you have anywhere else. But people appreciate their isolation there. They like their hunting, they like their fishing, they like to be left alone. And I'm a more social person, so that was a big challenge for me. I'll tell you one quick story based on a true story that illustrates the Alaska mindset. The 2 years I was there, no one invited me to Thanksgiving. And I exaggerate this story in the book, but this is the true part of it. And the Monday after one Thanksgiving, I came to work. One of the anchors said to me, "What did you do for Thanksgiving?" And I said, "Well, nothing really. I think I heated up a frozen lasagna." And she said, "We thought about inviting you." "You thought about inviting me?" Well, I wasn't quite good enough to make the guest list. And I know she didn't mean it. She didn't mean it to be cruel. She wasn't saying it like that, like you're not quite good enough to be invited. What she really meant was, and it reflected the Alaska mindset, we just don't invite people for Thanksgiving. It's not what we do here. We have it with our own little core of family and friends. So that's very typical in Alaska.
That's so great. So would you go back?
Not to work.
Yes.
Yeah. And they wanted me to stay, but it's so isolated. And, a lot of people, and all these topics I do deal with in the book, but a lot of people are bothered by the light and the dark issue. Like in Anchorage, the shortest day of the year, 4 hours of sunlight. In the winter, in the summer, you might have 4 hours of kind of twilighty dark, and so that's hard for some people to deal with. For me, it was the length of the winter. Like 5 or 6 months where you never see a rooftop because the snow never melts. That's a lot. I covered one of the issues that I covered a lot, and this surprises people given what they think about Alaska. Like other cities, Alaska has a huge problem with homeless people. And even in the dead of winter, there are hundreds of people living in tents outside in Anchorage. But what do? They burn propane tanks inside their tents.
Oh, that's dangerous.
They die. No, it's very dangerous.
Yeah.
And the city does its best to try to deal with it, but like everywhere, it's a very difficult issue to deal with. So in the book, one of the things I do is to try to make light of not a light situation, but I'm trying to add a little bit of humor to the stories I'm telling. And so the mayor of Anchorage at the time suggested as a way to deal with the problem, let's put everybody on an airplane and send them south to the lower 48. Well, that didn't work too well. That was a real suggestion. That didn't work too well with people in the lower 48. In my book, I took that to an absurd level where the mayor proposes to the city council a plan called Teach a Neighbor to Fish. And the idea is that there's so much salmon around Alaska, if we just give everybody a pole and some wading boots, they can get their own food and they won't have to be a drain on the city's economy. Of course, that in the book fails.
Well,
but then the flip side is...
I gotta believe social programs are kind of antithetical to this libertarian view that most Alaskans have. I'm not saying they don't have them, and they probably have a certain number of them they gotta have, but I would think that there are people that don't really like that.
That's true. That's definitely a cornerstone of it. And like one of the ongoing issues in Alaska is, should you have a state tax? There's no sales tax anywhere in Alaska. There are some local sales tax. There's no state sales tax, and there's no state income tax. And you get, if you're a resident, full-time resident, you get what's called a PFD, a permanent fund dividend. You get paid by the state. Every individual gets a check every year, share of state tax revenue from oil and gas drilling. So people love that PFD. They'd rather get their check from the government, which is, a reflection of natural resources, than pay more taxes to fund various programs. So there's always, that true sense, and it's so unique. Like, the government shouldn't have anything to do with me up there, but they mean it across the board. So Alaska has tended to have almost no restriction on abortion, no restriction on guns. People who are homeschooled can get their share of the state tax revenue that goes to education. Anyway, it's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking to David Bernkopt. The book is 2 Years on Another Planet. Thanks for being with me today.
It's local radio, and that's why you're listening. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
We covered that at the time, Molly, but I had forgotten about how low she and the White House sunk when the justices' lives were in danger.
Well, and this is a really big issue nationwide, is intimidation of federal judges. There are laws that say you cannot try to change an opinion by protesting or threatening a judge or a justice. Merrick Garland had many tools at his disposal. The Biden White House could have said, we think it's disgusting that you're posting the home address of this justice who lives with his wife and children. And as you alluded to earlier, Kavanaugh and his family were faced with an assassin on their street who was trying to murder him and his family, but also he said he wanted to get two other justices as well, presumably the 3 Trump-appointed justices.
It is the Martha Zoller Show, and that's Mollie Hemmingway, and we are talking to her right now. She's a best-selling author and the editor-in-chief of the Federalist, one of the best publications that you're going to ever read. They have the most thoughtful debate, and I'm just so happy to welcome her to the program. Mollie, how are you?
It's great to be here with you, Martha.
I'm in Washington, D.C. today. I'm actually going to be going to the joint session this afternoon, so I'm very excited about that.
Oh, that's very exciting.
So when I was a kid at the University of Georgia, Prince Charles came to visit the University of Georgia. So I actually saw him when I was about 17 years old, and then are going to get to see him again. So I'm an Anglophile, so this is a big day for me. But you've written a book called... I'm sorry.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I have a King Charles Cavalier, which is about as close to an Anglophile as I get. Otherwise,
that's so great.
Otherwise, I'm very happy that we were able to leave our brothers there across the pond.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Your new book is called Alito, the Justice Who Reshaped the Supreme Court and Restored the Constitution. And you're right about that. I mean, I'm a strict constructionist. I like to look at the Constitution the way it is. And Sam Alito has been, I don't think surprising, but I think unexpected of just what an impact he has had on the court.
Well, a few years ago, I co-authored a book on the Supreme Court with Carrie Severino on Justice Kavanaugh. And when we interviewed people for that, everybody was saying, why don't you talk about Sam Alito more? Why does nobody talk about him more? He's this giant on the court. Everybody knows about Scalia. Everybody knows about Thomas. But very few people talk as they should about Justice Alito. He has been on the court for 20 years and is behind some of the most impressive victories that people who care about the original meaning of the Constitution have had on the court. And so just because he's reserved and very humble, I thought, well, someone needs to do it. And I wanted to know more about him. And I'm so glad I did, because it turns out a lot of people want to know more about the one justice that they seem to know the least about.
So what was the biggest surprise you found as you were doing this research?
Well, the most interesting thing I think I found, based on my curiosity, was just how he differs or compares and contrasts with his originalist colleagues. And I think there's something about this moment that really speaks to this unique quality he has. In conservatism, we seem to have these people who care only about principle or only about political success. And with Alito, you see this balance of pragmatism and philosophy that I think would be good for the whole conservative movement to embrace, that principles and prudence go together, that they're not in conflict with each other. But as far as, I interviewed nearly 100 people, and probably the most explosive thing I learned was how the liberal justices went out of their way to sabotage the release of the Dobbs decision, even as they knew that their colleagues were under constant death threat. And I have all the details in the book about how they did that, and it was truly very shocking to me.
So, I mean, I've read those portions of the book. I've not completely finished the book, but I was shocked too, because at the time of the Dobbs decision, I was serving as the interim executive director for the Georgia Life Alliance. I was on the founding board, and we were in between executive directors, and they've asked me if I'd serve while they were looking. And so I happened to be at the National Right to Life event that was in Atlanta on that day. So it was a very friendly place for that decision to come out, and it was so amazing because the word started to get out, and then it was almost like a rolling celebration that started down the halls and in the breakout sessions, and it was really an amazing and very safe place for that decision to come out. And then, of course, a few months before, we had the opinion that was leaked, and it was just an amazing and spectacular time in our history.
It was something that the conservative legal movement had worked 50 years to achieve, and there had been previous times when it should have happened, but people didn't have the courage or they just couldn't withstand the incredible pressure from the media and other left-wing activists. And so it never should have lasted for 50 years. Almost immediately, everybody realized it was a joke of a decision, people on left and right. But it had taken that long, and I also, that was a big part of the book, was telling the story about how the Dobbs decision came to the Supreme Court, how Alito and others made sure it was, to be heard, how they handled the oral arguments, and then how Alito authored that masterful opinion. That was another surprising thing I found out when researching this book, was that everyone kind of knew on the court that Roe was about to be overturned, but they did not expect it would be such a masterful opinion that just eviscerated every single potential argument against, or every single argument that would have said that abortion is hidden in the Constitution. They were really blindsided by how effective Alito's opinion was.
So without revealing, any information you can't reveal, you tell a story in the book about Elena Kagan just basically losing it after the decision comes out. Tell us a little bit about that.
So there are times when the justices meet only with each other. It's just the 9 justices. No other members of the staff or their clerks are in the room. And after the Dobbs leak, 2 of the justices explicitly asked their colleagues to either get it out immediately or give a date by which time they would be done with their dissent. A decision is not final from the Supreme Court unless it's publicly announced. And to be publicly announced, you need the opinion, but also the dissent. The opinion had been done for months. The one that was leaked had been done for like months and months and months, but the dissent wasn't coming. So you have multiple justices asking these people, could you please speed it up, or, our kids' lives are being threatened. And instead, Elena Kagan goes to Justice Breyer's chambers. Breyer is a solid progressive liberal, but he did seem to be willing to accommodate his friends on the court who were conservative. And she, according to my sources, was screaming at him not to accommodate them. And it's shown also that that's true because they didn't get the dissent out until sometime in June. And then when they did finally file it, they included a gratuitous and completely unnecessary footnote to another decision that actually was still being worked on. That had been, and so they really behaved in a very inappropriate fashion. People talk about how well they get along with each other, but it's kind of amazing they get along at all with each other, given that these justices were willing to have these people's lives threatened. And during that time, during the delay, was when Kavanaugh's family had that assassin on their street.
We're talking to Mollie Hemmingway. She's the author of the book Alito, the Justice Who Reshaped the Supreme Court and Restored the Constitution. I think it's fair to say that the Supreme Court of the United States is probably under the worst attack that they have been under since probably FDR's time when he wanted to pack the court. You're starting to hear, even though he is being discredited more and more and more, but you hear James Carville continue to talk about packing the court, and you hear that out there. You've had a lot of questions around, all the different justices, not in a negative way, but in just like a fearing for their life way almost. So, do you think that's fair to say? Is it under attack any more than it has been in the past?
I think in some ways it's worse, because while FDR was very powerful and did try to pack the court, you have right now that same thing. Many, many, many prominent Democrats, people like Kamala Harris and others, are calling for the packing of the court. But you also have these very well-funded and coordinated activist campaigns to destroy or undermine the integrity of the court, which, one of the things I tell about in the book is how ProPublica, which is a left-wing propaganda group that does journalism to help out Democrats and to hurt Republicans, they got $53 million in 1 year to go after Justice Thomas and Justice Alito. And they spent it to go after them. This type of political campaign doesn't, for the judiciary is supposed to be not political. They have lifetime tenure. You can't cut their pay. The whole point is to protect them from the political process. But the left has figured out, well, that means they're vulnerable. They don't have campaign directors. They don't have PR teams. They can't do anything if we attack them. And so they do these propaganda efforts and other political campaign strategies to go after any justice who they dislike, or more often I think it's to send a warning to other Republican-appointed men and women to say, if you don't want to get treated like Alito and Thomas have been treated, well then just don't rule like them. Don't make your decisions like them, and we'll treat you better.
Yeah, I find it so, because I have great reverence for the Supreme Court, because by and large, they are independent. And yeah, there have been times they've made decisions that I didn't like, but I feel like over time, they get it right. You know, sometimes it takes them a long time to get it right, but over time, they get it right. And you know, research shows that over time, also, justices kind of drift to the left over time. And so it's good to have as many justices that are starting out on the right as we have right now, because it does seem, when you look at the history of justices, that over time, they don't necessarily become left-wing, but they drift a little bit to the left over time.
Well, the pressure that these federal judges and justices are under is intense. And it is very one-sided. You know, you have all the powerful media institutions pressuring any Republican-appointed judge or justice to squish out. You don't see that same pressure from the right. And one of the things you have to do is vet for that. I think it's also worth noting that even with the frustrations that some conservatives have with this court, it is far and away the best court the country has had in history. The caliber of the justices is very high. Even the ones that are weaker, like the ones that you might point out and say, oh, they're kind of weaker than I would like, they're more conservative than what we saw in the past, or they're more willing to adhere to the Constitution than what we saw even in the recent past. And so it's worth remembering that. But any vetting should check for, are you able to withstand pressure? And on that note, since I also co-authored that book on Kavanaugh, I have to say, he was a pretty moderate pick from the beginning, but I think he has surprised people with how he has not moved to the left under pressure. He's not exactly had the response to his horrific confirmation hearings that a Justice Thomas had, which was I will never surrender to these monsters kind of opinion or approach to what they did. But he's been pretty solid, and he went through a great deal. What he went through was very horrific.
Absolutely. So, Mollie, the book's came out Tuesday, right? Or did it come out today or last Tuesday?
It came out 1 week ago, and it's doing very well, and I'm really glad that people are enjoying it. I've been getting notes from people, both in terms of notes like federal judges, but notes from the normal reader that I actually am trying to make sure understands everything that's interesting about Justice Alito. And so I'm glad that it's being well received and that it's selling. But yes, it's been out for a week now.
Absolutely, and you can find it everywhere you buy books, and you can read Mollie's work at the Federalist. You also see her on Fox News all the time, and, great work. Keep it up, Mollie. Thanks for being with me.
Thank you, Martha.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.